Welcome to Game Changer. My name is Daniel and I'm your host. Game Changer is brought to you by Connors Coaching. You can show your support to our show and what we represent by logging into YouTube, liking and subscribing to our content, and leave a comment about what inspires you about this video. We created this channel to inspire you about positivity, coaching, personal development, leadership development, emotional intelligence, business to business services, and more. We go live on Wednesdays and we have special guests on the second and fourth Wednesday of each month. Together, let's get inspired and find the next best version of ourselves. I am joined today by a guest. I am so excited to have you here with us, Rachel. Rachel Marie is my LinkedIn sister. She owns the Optimized Office, and she has a master's in business administration, which ironically is how we met, but not because I was in the program with you, because my spouse was in the program with you. And I am so glad that we met because we just resonate on so many different levels. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I know I feel the same way. It's kind of the magic of, I would normally say LinkedIn, but in this case, the magic of your spouse that that brought us together. Yeah, and not only that, but also I feel like you're an accountability buddy and just have great little sources of wisdom consistently.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, today you're going to talk to us about employee-employer partnerships, which is a model for employee engagement. But before we do that, tell me a little bit about the Optimized Office. Tell me about your business.
Yeah, so I started in 2019. Originally, the purpose was to create systems and processes for small businesses. And it was pretty general because in small business, you wear a lot of hats. And so my thought was that everything runs through the office, from costs to, potential prevention of liability issues, everything. So I thought, I'll just go in, do an assessment, and create some systems and processes. It's hard because it doesn't sound really fun, and so it's something that people don't really like to think about. But at any rate, over the last few years, it's been oddly, I've either been attracted to workplace types of scenarios and needs, or somehow it's a coincidence. But either way, now I'm focused almost entirely on a focus area of workplace relationships and creating processes around that.
And that's such an important thing. And most business managers don't get training on that. I know that that's kind of an area where we overlap a little bit from different sides, different angles. So that's exciting. And I can see your passion. So it makes sense that this is something that's resonating and bringing, you joy and also business.
It really is. It's not, I like systems and processes in general. I like to think about it, but it's pretty transactional. And this is something that it really does when I think that people can truly raise their joy level, so to speak, both from the business owner and from the employee side. It does make me feel good about that.
Yeah. Well, tell me about your ideal client. You mentioned small businesses. What does that look like?
So small business to mid-sized business, it really varies. It could be someone that's what we call, a micro size or a solopreneur who's hiring on their team for the first time. Usually it starts with 1 or 2 people. It could be a business that might have multiple locations and, 5, 6 team members in each location, on up to a larger business. And the common denominator is really a willingness upon at least the person contacting me. It might not be that everyone's on board yet, and that's okay, but at least a willingness to be open to new ideas and a true desire to make positive changes in the workplace.
Yeah, that's so important too. You can lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. That's the saying that goes with that. Well, today you're going to be talking with us about the employee-employer partnership, which is your model for employee engagement. So let's start by defining it. What does that mean? What does an employer-employee partnership look like?
Yeah, it goes, I've played around with the phrase. So another phrase that I like is shared value in the workplace. It's about redefining relationships in the workplace. So the best way to describe it is more imagining the way the workplace has looked traditionally up until I would say at least the last 10 years, which is sort of an exchange of money for time. And historically, that's really been all that's been expected is, pay me a certain rate and I'll give you something in return. It might be time, it might be some performance that, a goal. And that's not enough for people anymore. And so when I think of the phrase shared value, it actually came from the MBA program. And in a larger sort of business sense, shared value is where it's going beyond corporate social responsibility and it's actually creating a value for the business and then also a value for others. It could be the society, it could be the environment, et cetera. In this case, it's for employees. And so the question is, and the partnership model revolves around first identifying what are the values that the employee holds, what are their desires, what are their goals, what are their needs, and how can that overlap with what the business offers and what the business goals are. And so bringing all of those things together so that this is truly, it's a transformational relationship. Both parties go away. It doesn't matter if the employee is only there for 2 years, but both parties go away with something greater than what they started with.
Yeah, sounds like synergy to me, where
Yes.
it's two parts that are greater together than they are apart, kind of like our friendship.
Yes. Thank you, Daniel.
You're welcome. This cheesy moment just
I know.
reminds you that this is an authentic live moment. We don't plan these things out. Um, you mentioned shared values in the workplace, and that really speaks to kind of one of my passions, which is, core values being shared. But it sounds more like well, what do you mean when you say that?
Yeah. No,
I don't
no,
want to
I
put
know.
words in your mouth.
No, that's okay. It's so much, and it's been actually hard. This is why, I'm so glad that I've been pushed myself really also to do this today because it's the first time that I'm really trying to verbalize it. I have a variety of materials put around it, but it's so many things, and I think. So what I'm really getting at is it's about employee engagement, it's about participation, it's about it covers all of those areas that we talk about today and the concerns having to do with turnover, et cetera. But what it really is it's about identifying mutual value and maybe even creating it where we didn't even know it existed before.
I think it would help if we had like a real life example. Can you give us a real life example of what those values might look like?
Yes. I've thought about this a lot. There are so many different kinds and they all look a little bit different. But I'll tell you so I searched back in my mind and I thought, when was the first time that I really even tried this? And it was actually before the optimized office, going back probably about 10 years ago. I was the manager of an administrative group. So there were a few office managers, some administrative assistants, and they spanned 4 locations. And it was before Zoom. Maybe Zoom was around, but I didn't use it. I don't think a lot of people did. So we didn't have really good connection. There were a lot of people that I think some of them weren't very happy. Turnover was starting to increase, et cetera. You get the picture.
Yeah.
So in my head, I thought, what is it if we could come together and really have an honest conversation? I mean, honest, so honest, where I could say, you know what, maybe you're not going to plan to be here for the next 5 to 10 years, and that's okay. Let's come together and figure out what is it that you want, what is it that we're and the team also. This is where workplace relationships come in. It's not always just about employer employee. So how can the team support each other as well? So I'll take a pause because I get so excited. I start talking really fast. So what we did was we literally came together. Now, back then it was in person, but today it could be over a Zoom. We literally came together and went over these questions. What is it that you want? What is it that you value? What is it? So for example, one woman finally admitted, she said, I've been afraid to say this, but I don't even really want to be here long from now. I want to go back to school and I want to go in a completely different career direction. Turns out another person wanted to move to a completely different region and a different department and pursue that career. Someone else, totally different thing. She said, I don't feel like I can spend time with my family like I'd like to because all of the expectations that I have here to stay late. And you know what we figured out from that conversation is that it she really wasn't expected to stay late. And it was sort of this feeling we were able to kind of look at her schedule, and she ended up, having time. The woman who wanted to go off to school, 2 years later, she went off to school and she had a good reference and she helped develop some of the processes. Um, the woman who wanted to go to a different division went on to a different division. And I've checked on her a few times. She's really grown with the company as well. So, I mean, that's an example. I didn't know the phrase shared value, and I didn't use this terminology, but that's kind of at the heart of what it is.
Yeah, it's kind of personalizing, and to a large extent, it sounds a lot like venting. Like they had these frustrations, whether you asked them for them or not. Those frustrations were real, and they were preventing them from enjoying their work to an extent. And how miserable must that feel?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And on both sides, sometimes it's easy to get into this sort of adversarial, is the employee taken care of or is the employer taken care of? In this case, the employees were taken care of because I agree, they were able to get that off their chest, also able to find solutions and do things. But it wasn't just the employee that benefited, it was also the employer. They gained, someone that created these great processes, and the lady that left for school, they gained someone who rised through the ranks and, performed well. And then the lady, in terms of, the schedule, the one that needed the,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, she ended up in sales and she brought that company so much, because she was enthusiastic. She
Yeah.
was happy.
Well, who wouldn't be happy? When your employer shows that they care about you, it's a lot easier to care about them, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, so I'm curious, because it's clear that you're passionate about this and it's clear that this is an area of focus for you, but why? What is it about this that excites you the most?
Oh, there's so many things. I've noticed over the years, from the perspective of being in a support position, from the perspective of a manager, and then later dealing with business owners as a contractor, I've seen this over and over and over again as a common issue. And I think oftentimes we're looking at a lot of other symptoms and trying to solve the symptoms when we're not really getting at the cause. And so that's one thing that really sparked my interest. But then I had a few bad work experiences myself. Um, and to be completely transparent, this process has also given me some reflection on some ways that I could have led better as well in the past. So the work experiences that I had, for the most part, I've had wonderful experiences, but there's always going to be a few. And it made me realize the level of suffering that can happen when there is such a misalignment between employee and employer, or when it's not necessarily a misalignment, but when the communication is just not what it should be. There's something missing. There's a variety of
Yeah.
things that are missing. So experiencing that was sort of the final, like, I really want to make a difference. And then one last piece is seeing it from the business owner's point of view, seeing that these people who have risked a lot to start their own business, and here they are, and then they end up in situations where they feel very frustrated, and it's kind of heartbreaking too, because they don't want to have these negative relationships with people, the team. They also want to feel like the team cares, not that they're just going to work and checking in and out every day. So all of those pieces come together, and I think that's why I do feel so passionate about it.
Yeah. It reminds me, we talk about truisms on this show a lot. One of my truisms is no one wakes up to be the villain in your story. No one purposefully wakes up to make someone's life miserable, but oftentimes when you get into those kinds of situations, it feels like it's purposeful or it's intentional. And it's not. Sometimes conflict just happens. It's
Yeah.
just natural. And being able to address it and deal with it in a rational and calm way, what a change that must make for the business for both sides.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. Actually, I'm gonna remember that. I remember a post that you did about no one wakes up, yeah, to be the villain, and that's such a good point. And I think if people can see that, it's really tricky, and that's why at the end I'll mention a template that I created, but that's why a template alone can't get at it because there are so many different little aspects to it, and yeah, but
And
that's
this
one.
isn't the first template that you've created. You've created multiple templates for this work.
Oh yeah, yeah, I
I
did.
know because I've seen them. They're really good.
Thank
You
you.
guys should, everyone out there should follow her on LinkedIn. She's amazing.
Well, thank you. Yeah,
Well,
I
yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
no, oh no, I this is so the employee employer partnership is sort of it's one aspect of the larger, and so those templates I've been creating different aspects around it. But what I'm doing right now, I shouldn't say I'm trying, what I'm doing is pulling it all together into more of a comprehensive model rather than getting it at all of the individual pieces.
What industries do you see this working the best in? Like retail or medical?
For a while, I thought that it wouldn't work well in certain industries, but the more that I look at it, I don't think it's that it wouldn't work well. I think it would work in every industry, every position, but the trick though is that it varies so much, and that's where the customization comes in. So partnerships in an architect firm, for example, where there are fewer employees, the employees have probably more flexibility and ownership of their projects, probably a longer uh, term, working there, lower turnover, all of that, all of those things factor in, not to mention the amount of budget that can be spent per employee. I mean, that's just the reality. That's a reality that has to be faced.
Yeah.
It just,
Yeah, I mean, if you're running a fast food restaurant and you're paying $15 an hour, you're not going to give the same consideration to reducing turnover as when you would have to prevent losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in having to retrain someone for an architecture or, a position in that class. And it's not to say that the architect and is a better job. It's just
Mhm.
better paying and it costs more to train them.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and you bring up a really good point, which is it's okay. This is one of my points. It's okay to recognize that the turnover rate is going to be higher for for certain positions. And I think that's something that you really have to, because once you can recognize that and once you can really talk about it, and once employees feel safe to say, I don't really want to do this job for the next 5 years, then you can really start to make breakthroughs and say, okay, then how can we help each other while you're here?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I remember, that reminds me of my youth when I would go to my manager and say, "Hey, I'm interested in this position. Tell me more about it. How can I make myself the kind of person that you would see in this role?" And
Mhm.
just to encourage that kind of behavior out of your staff proactively, you're turning them into leaders. It's amazing.
Yeah, and not only that, it's also, a real important part of employer branding too. What you're saying to other people is, hey, if you come here, we're going to be partners. We're going to work, and your life is probably going to show for it. There was like I just saw something. This is a little bit of an old story, but it's an example. I guess Gap, Gap, the clothing company, they made some changes where they, in retail, one of the big complaints is the schedule. People might have to work on the holidays. They might not know when they're even going to work until maybe the week before. So the Gap invested some money. They ended up creating some consistent schedules. And I forget off the top of my head, but they figured the value, the cost savings out of it as well, not to mention the lives that were changed for the better. And it was a winner. And so I think a lot of these progressive companies are able to do that and are thinking about it. But the small and mid-sized businesses, I think, don't always realize that there are these changes that we can be making relatively easily.
Well, and so many of them are, like my father-in-law was a lawyer. Um, he had to hire, secretaries and things like
Mhm.
that to work in his law firm. he wasn't trained to be a manager. I'm sure he took classes and he was successful for very many years.
Mhm.
But there are so many professions out there where we're not training our leaders to lead. And this is such a good support for those small businesses that are likely to be in those kind of fields. So I just want to applaud you and recognize you for serving that area.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Well, let's kind of move let's move towards action. So if someone's listening to this show and they really want to get started implementing this right now, what are the steps that they should follow?
I think the first step would be identifying what the value is that their employees have. And when I say value, there's two different ways to think about that. One is identifying the mutual values, the workplace values, and along the lines of mission and purpose. But then also their personal values in terms of what they're looking for, what they want, what they desire, that is, what motivates them. And so one way of doing that is the what I call the personal, professional, and financial goals, and I abbreviated to the PPF. I didn't actually make those up. I came along them along the way someplace, and and I stuck them in my little toolbox of stuff to remember. But I think it works. So essentially, you're figuring out what is it that personally you have a goal, professional goal and financial goal. And I'll leave it at that for now. But I have created a template and some instructions for it can be expanded on.
Awesome. And I think that's what you were planning on sharing with our audience today. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So we'll leave that in the comments for this video. If you're interested, make sure you go check those out and follow the link there. And then also make sure you check out Rachel on LinkedIn and on openoffice.com. Um, what would they what so what do you do with that sheet once you've done that? Is it the instructions detail the next steps?
Well, that's where it gets tricky. There really are so many nuances. And I'll give you an example. I talked to someone today who has a situation where um, the team is probably not immediately going to be receptive to this. And there are a lot of reasons to that. And so you have to start in a little bit of a different way. So, I mean, part of this is really knowing your team, knowing where they're at, what their frustration level is. So you might come at it from a few different points. So this worksheet is literally a worksheet that you can print and use and have, there are some prompts in the instructions for leaders to use. And you can start there if you want, but there are a lot of different entrances and exits and ways to fit this in. So I would recommend, I'm not, I do complimentary book calls where we can explore it. So I do recommend taking a look at it and
Yeah.
giving me a call.
So what I'm hearing is that you're an expert and that people can rely on you if it's too complicated or if they have some contingency issues.
That's right, absolutely. And I enjoy talking about it. So I have no problem if someone just wants to call and say, "Hey, I want to use this, I'm not ready to for an engagement, but what do you think my next steps should be based on the situation?" I would love that.
Yeah, absolutely. So give her a call out there. I just want to say thank you again for being here with us today, Rachel. It's been a joy to have you not only as my friend on LinkedIn, but also as my guest today. And to the audience, thank you so much for watching us today. Since you stayed this long, why don't you take just a second to like this video and subscribe to our content? That really helps this channel out and it will help us extend our range so that we can inspire even more people. Next week, we're going to be talking about the perfection trap, which is just, a little hint. Something is always better than nothing. So if you want to tune in next week, we will be talking about that. And until then, I will see you next time.